Welcome, you guys, to Thursday Talks. This is Lola Troy. I am the host and curator of Heal Black Joy, the learning platform for our community to heal our Black joy with tangible and attainable programs for the mind, body, soul, relationships, and business. We're going to try to get back in, you guys, and hopefully we can get them on. I just sent you a request. Hi.
Hey, what's going on?
How are you?
I'm good, actually. I was trying to get in on your last one, but I'm not sure what was happening. I
I
sent the
don't
request, I
know.
accepted the request, but it didn't work.
It wasn't connected. Well, that's fine. Sometimes you got to do it one more time to get in, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I want to give you your just due. So I got to go through this wonderful introduction of who you are to tell our Heal Black Joy tribe who we are speaking with tonight. So you guys, our guest
Okay.
tonight is James Harris. He attended St. Paul's College, which, by the way, my father went to that school as well. So he's an alumni as well. He has a BA in psychology. And after his freshman year, he joined the Army. He has 8 years of service with an honorable discharge. He also has 2 deployments, one to Iraq and the other one to Afghanistan. After his military duty, he earned an MA in clinical mental health counseling from South University. He is soon to be a licensed professional counselor. He's a member of Chi Sigma Iota, ACA, RACA, and sits on the board of NAMIC Virginia. So today he's a multi-entrepreneur in Richmond, Virginia. From the therapeutic standpoint, he works in community-based services in the inner city. He sits on FAPT team meetings at school, as well as social services, private practice, and has started an international movement. And what is that movement, you guys? That movement is called Men to Heal, which is assisting men to focus on their overall wellness, mental, and physical health. He conducts quarterly sessions on various topics involving men and mental health. So feel free to stroll his page after we do this wonderful interview to purchase a shirt, get familiar, or see him with celebrities, athletes, and politicians who are in support of this major movement. He conducts speaking engagements for various companies and has done engagements in many states and in 5 countries via Skype. He also owns the Healing Hub, which offers outpatient therapy, massages, yoga, mindfulness, financial literacy seminars, and feeds the less fortunate every third Saturday. Lastly, and most importantly, he has authored his first book, you guys, that you guys have got to go purchase, and we're going to talk about it at the end of our interview. Man, Just Express Yourself, which is an interactive guide for men, young and old. You can get a copy wherever books are sold. He also has a YouTube channel which you can subscribe to called Men to Heal, where he gives insight on certain health, both physical and mental, in relations to men and family. And we're going to talk about your website at the end of our interview. So welcome, James Harris. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. Definitely appreciate you for having me, extending the invitation to your platform. I don't take it lightly, so hopefully we can produce for your audience.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to have you because most of the followers on Heal Black Joy are women. However, we do have some men, and I wanted to do something not only specifically for them. So I know that November was like a month that my content, I was going to do something for women, but we have done so many things for our women followers. And I was like, hey, I got to do something for our brothers. So November at Heal Black Joy is all things Black men. I wanted to do an ode to Black men because, one, we love Black men, and two, I wanted to do a deep dive into the issues that are plaguing our brothers. And I know that you play such a huge part in the community, in the mental health space. And I'm so glad to be having this conversation with you.
No, I mean, yeah, I definitely appreciate you for selecting me. So, and I definitely appreciate you extending the invitation, being that your platform is, like you said, primarily women, because they have husbands, fathers, sons, and they work with
Right.
men. So I guess this will
Yeah.
be insightful for them. So,
Yeah. So, getting right into it, I read on your site how you got into the mental health space, but I want you to tell our followers your journey and why you're so passionate about mental health, specifically in Black men.
well, I was a young black boy who needed assistance. So when I was younger, therapy was mandatory because I was in the foster care system with a group home.
Mm-hmm.
Being a ward of the state, it was a weekly check in the box, but it wasn't a pleasant experience. So for me, I just want to ensure that I'm doing my due diligence and giving back. And most of that unpleasurable experience came from um, a white system. It was older white therapists, men and women, and I'm this young black kid from the project, so it was so unrelatable. It was foreign. So I didn't obtain as much as I could from therapy, but of course I knew the benefits of therapy, and I knew I needed to process different things within myself. Just um, from whether it was trauma or grief or just different symptoms that was occurring. And then fast forward later, like you said, joined the military, 8 years Army, 2 deployments, one Iraq, one Afghanistan. And same thing, I tried therapy again and still was an unpleasant experience. This time it was more so the lack of military experience from the therapist. So again, we stuck with a poor cultural competence within prescribing different things to the people that they're supposed to display this wealth of knowledge to. So for me, and a lot of other veterans too, that's why they tend to go to the groups opposed to individual therapy. It just was so unrelatable. So just taking those experiences that I personally had, I just figured I had to do it. So paused entrepreneurship, went back, got my bachelor's, then my master's, then I started my licensure journey.
I think that is so imperative and so needed in what's going on right now in our society, because we have, just like your story, people that are growing up in a particular environment, and then when they're having to go to therapy, the therapist, one, doesn't look like them, and then two, they can't speak from that experience, right? So there's nothing that's relatable to them. So you already have that barrier between the person who's going to get the therapy and the actual therapist, and someone who doesn't necessarily have empathy or doesn't have the experience to speak to our issues. And that's really imperative. And that is actually what Heal Black Joy was stemmed from, or was birthed out of. I was taking a class, and the class that I was taking, the guy couldn't speak, the facilitator could not speak to my experience as a Black woman, as a Black human being. He didn't know, how to speak to our experience. And I think it's very important that we have representation in the healthcare space, especially when it comes to mental health, because the content that I've put up this week about statistics, the stresses of Black men, not only the stresses of Black men, but Black women. But because we're talking about Black men this month, there's so many stresses that you guys have, and you're not getting the same type of care, or going to mental health facilities, or going to speak to somebody about the stresses that surround, the everyday living. Can you speak to that? Like, what has been your vantage point on talking to brothers, and them actually being eager to come to speak with you and be vulnerable enough to have those conversations with you?
I mean, for me, I just found that authenticity is its best. I guess people gravitate to not only what they look like, but you just somebody that they feel that will allow themselves to be vulnerable enough for them to open up. So I'm open enough. Whether every walk of my life, based on my journey, whether that's trying to assist somebody from preventing different steps or within my journey that I had to endure, or whether it's just educating people. And most of it, I find myself educating people on certain symptomology or diagnoses and things like that to get over the hump and to end the stigma. So I just want to be in a position to continue to serve and let people know it's okay to not only seek therapy but process their emotions. Some I often say is feel your feelings, and oftentimes men feel their feelings. They just don't know how to articulate what they're feeling. And that's where the disconnect come in. So, and on the other end of that, it's the people vicariously around them that get I guess, the displacement from that. So whether it's anger or resentment or, all those other symptomologies, opposed to just telling them, hey, I need space, or I'm trying to process, or I'm dealing with something, it's this other things manifest themselves. So.
Absolutely. I know you were speaking about, men having that displacement of anger or grief or depression or whatever that is. During the pandemic, I think that was polarized because one, we had the pandemic, everybody was at home, so there was really no outlet, right? And then the George Floyd murder happened right on national television where we saw it, and most of us didn't know what to do with our emotions, right? Women were, kids were had big question marks. Women were scared. We were scared that you guys, if you went out to the grocery store, anything could happen. So we were all experiencing trauma in real time. How important is it for our men to have an outlet, one, and how do we as women play a part in that outlet?
Yeah, so I mean, outlets are definitely important, but to speak on trauma, a lot of people, some of the misconceptions of trauma is a lot of people think it has to be something that they're like actually in, but it can be something that you witness. So it doesn't have to be you experiencing this stimuli. It can be something that you observe. And vicarious trauma or complex trauma, of course, we send those different images on the news, whether it was, week after week, another black man. So those things were definitely unfortunate, and it can affect not only the man themselves, their psyche, their emotions, their feelings, but of course, like you said, the women who love and respect and cherish these men. But I would say that the women can continue to support by offering up a space for those guys to be vulnerable without being, chastised or demonized for expressing their feelings. But I would also um, tell my sisters or the ladies out there to put yourself, make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well, uh, to make sure that you're in a safe space, because it can be draining, and so many different emotions going through by trying to pour into somebody who don't really want to pour into themselves. And oftentimes that happen. Two things that I always tell people when they come to the office for therapy is, one, I can't help nobody who don't see issue with their actions, or I can't help nobody who don't want to be helped. So I would encourage my sisters to do that as well, so they're not putting ourselves in a position to where they're going to be emotionally harmed or drained or potentially physically harmed by, meeting so much resistance from this male. So we definitely want to ensure that we're being supportive and being allies, but we also want to ensure that we're also being safe and realistic about the situation. So, she can do her job by, I guess, suggesting different material or suggesting different research or tools, whether it is YouTube or different videos or articles, or just bringing it to his attention that, hey, I noticed you've been acting different lately, or you're not talking, or change the appetite or things like that. But if she's met with resistance, I wouldn't encourage her to continue to push, because it can become cantankerous in those situations.
Absolutely. I know I posted about depression, the statistics in Black men, and some of those statistics that were showing up were um, among men age 18 to 44 who had daily feelings of anxiety or depression. Non-Hispanic Black and Hispanic men, 26.4%, were less likely than their white counterparts to have used mental health treatments. Is that because of the representation or the lack of representation of people that look like us, where they don't feel they can go talk to someone who doesn't come from that experience?
Yeah, so those are some of the reasons, but we also have to look at the reasons too, like the miseducation around depression. I speak to a lot of athletes, and they still like, so by the time you get to me, I guess you realize like, yo, you need help or you want help, one of the two. So when I do re-educate men on what depression is, it's a whole new ball game to them. So I think education around just basic diagnoses have to be introduced to them. So a lot of athletes will say, "Oh, I can't be depressed, man. I had XYZ tackles, or I put up this many buckets." That's a cheerleader diagnosis. And these are some of the things that I hear in practice, in different sessions. And I, of course, other men say similar things to where like, nah, that's for women. But when I break it down to them, the anger, the irritability, the lack of sleeping, loss of appetite, loss of interest and pleasure, not interacting how they used to, insomnia, hyposomnia, so many different other variations of it, then they sit back and be like, oh man, I've been going through this. I've had this for 2 weeks or longer, or whatever. All right, cool. So now that we know what it is, we can treat it. So, and to add to those statistics, access and availability is, of course, an issue within our community as well, because it's not a lot of spaces for men to feel welcome, especially Black men. And that's important. So we want to ensure that we're doing our part by um, having safe pockets to where one can be vulnerable, or where one can get treated, or just at least get information on those type of diagnoses.
Absolutely. I think when you were talking about it being taboo, just growing up, I grew up in North Carolina, and growing up in the Bible Belt South, it was so taboo for any of us in our community to go seek therapy. Um, Either we sought it in church, or it was like we didn't have autonomy over our feelings. It was like, you have to be quiet. You're to be there but not heard. You're to be seen but not heard, right? So when you are reared in a family or a dynamic where your emotions were not, you weren't afforded to be able to express yourself or express your emotions, and then you become an adult. When you start interacting with other adults, we're all walking around not being able to express ourselves, or growing up in an environment where we were not able to express ourselves. How important is it for our generation now to teach our kids, um, safe have safe spaces for them to express themselves, so that when they become adults, they'll be able to, reach out if they do need to seek therapy, and that it's not taboo, and it's not something that you have to go to therapy because you are deemed crazy, because that was the stigma that came up. People that went to therapy when I was growing up, oh, that person was crazy. It's not about somebody being crazy anymore. So how do you tell us, what is that verbiage, or what is that safe space for us as mothers, as fathers, to be able to speak to our youth about being able to have autonomy over their emotions, one, and being able to have that safe space where they can express themselves, even if it gets to the point where they feel like they need therapy.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we definitely have to have more conversations such as this. We have to have more education around the difference between mental health and mental illness, because mental health is just your overall wellness. So that's
Right.
your your emotional needs, your physical health, your psychological health. All of those things comprise of your mental health. I think when people think of therapy, they automatically assume the illness piece of it, thinking like,
Right.
I'm not talking to myself. I'm not hearing voices. I'm not, doing
Yeah.
irate stuff, so they think that, opposed to thinking maintenance, or thinking this is something that I just need to relinquish myself of. So once we get to that point to where we can do it, I think it'll be a little bit more comfortable. And on the other part of your question, as far as being raised a certain way, and as parents now, what we have to do, we definitely have to ensure that we're not bringing those same cycles that we endure to our generation. Because realistically, like I mean, I think a lot of people have to give our parents grace because one, they were dealing with their own things or their own traumas, and they definitely didn't know how to process it or have as much access as we do now. And then two, we have to ensure that we are allowing the next generation to be open and vulnerable without demonizing and chastising them. And I think now, though, it's way more easier, even for me seeing it. A lot of people are more open and talking about wellness, whether it's athletes or celebrities or radio personalities. So it is more. Open to say, I'm not feeling this, or I'm doing mindfulness or I'm taking a break. So it's more open to people wanting to do different things that are therapeutic. But even those things shouldn't replace actual therapy. It's different benefits. And also, like, just because you go to therapy, that doesn't mean that you're going because of an issue. It can be career counseling, it can be school counseling, it can be for you to process or get a different insight into something. So therapy is definitely different for different people. And another thing too, like we shouldn't base it off somebody else's experience, or we shouldn't base it off what Hollywood is displaying what therapy is. So those things are definitely important. And it for anybody who want that breakdown, it's a couple different videos on my YouTube that break it down, and one of them is what is therapy, and I talk about what can potentially happen in therapy, and then another video on there is the intake session where I talk about what happens in the intake session. So it's a couple different videos. So that YouTube channel is Mental Heal, Mentoheal.
Absolutely. I think this is such a necessary conversation. Um, I know that Black men in particular, the community itself, we've had this pressure put on us, whether it's, from society, systemic racism, all these things that have been put on us, right? But as a Black man, um, we were reared in this space where Black men are supposed to be the protectors and the providers, and they're supposed to be the kings of the castle, right? So they got all this pressure, and then when they go out into the world, they're dealing with systemic racism. And so when they come home, they are coming home, and a lot of times I had a conversation when I did a Instagram live with a gentleman who talked about relationship, and he talked about when Black men specifically, when they come home, they don't have a place to decompress, because when they come home, it's like lights, camera, action. Now they've got to go into this role of being a husband, a father, the protector, the provider, and they don't even have that moment or that space to just chill or decompress. Talk to Hill Black Joy Tribe, the women specifically, about how important it is for us to not just see them in the role as father and husband and provider and protector, but also look at them as a human being who has feelings and emotions, and also needs a moment to decompress and be able to sit with his thoughts and be able to relax and not just always be on guard all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, first I would say that Black men aren't monoliths, so we're all different. So I can't speak to like every Black man experience, nor can I speak to every Black woman experience on either end of that. Because some relationships have positive or effective communication where they
Yeah.
are articulating their wants and needs, and it is a safe space for that brother to come home and decompress. So, I can't really speak to that, but for the sake of conversation, I would say if you are in that situation to where it's not a safe space, or your partner don't have a safe space to land when they do come home, that's something that you two have to figure out. So whether that is being open enough to discuss your feelings, your emotions, and what you need from your partner, those things can go a long way. And I think a lot of people don't have um, conversations or discussions around that because of how they were raised or previous relationships and things like that that may come to the forefront, and then they'll be met with resistance and then want to shut down because they don't know how to communicate. You know, they think everything is an argument, or they think that you know, victim blaming or whatever. So we definitely have to do more or do better within the context of who we are opening up to in that vulnerable space. So, and I think in many cases, a lot of men, once they are hit with that lack of empathy, lack of support, they shut down, you know, because realistically, a lot of people at a young age become emotionally immature. That's men and women because of something that happened. So if you know, if this young man or this woman, young woman, you know, had a situation prior to where they did open up, or where they expressed themselves and they were shunned for it, or they were called soft, or they was dismissed, they wasn't validated, then it's going to be difficult for them to want to come back around the next time something happened, you know. So they continue to bottle it up or continue to display it in a different behavior, whether that's being reckless or promiscuous or substance use or, you know, just argumentative, you know. So those things can happen, like opposed to just saying, hey, I need a break, or I'm not feeling well, or hey, this is what's wrong with me. This happened today.
Right.
So I think once we start to normalize it, once it becomes more of the norm, you know, again, so within your relationship, that's what has to take place. And that's between you and your partner, or who you are around when you do encounter those things. Because some, like I said, some of them are open and welcome, like, hey, I know you had a long day. I know you've been busy. Look, go ahead and chill. Or I got the kids, or I already prepared dinner. You know, they want to make it easy for you. So it depends on where you are within that spectrum of your relationship.
Yeah, someone that's some people that have high emotional intelligence versus someone who has low emotional intelligence. Um, I was introduced to this concept called the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, and I actually took the quiz. And it's a quiz that tallies up different types of abuse, neglect, and other hallmarks of a rough childhood. The higher your scores like to be, the higher your risk for health problems predicted, you know, further along in your adult life. So there are three different types of ACEs: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. When men struggle health wise, whether it's physical or mental, there's a link to childhood trauma. What patterns of childhood trauma are you seeing in Black men that they don't speak of about that affect their health?
Can you repeat your question? You was breaking up.
I'm sorry. So with that ACE score, when while men struggle health wise, whether it's physical or mental, there's a link to that childhood trauma. So what patterns of childhood trauma are you seeing in Black men that they can't speak to, you know, about that affect their health? Can you hear
I mean,
me?
I think yeah, I hear you down, but I think I caught the gist of your question. But just to clarify, though, the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, is not gender specific. So it's, you know, men and women can take it,
Right.
and based on what occurred within your lifestyle, you will get that score. But to answer your question, based on the men, so a lot of people don't know the father wound is a thing, and the father wound affects not only men, but it can affect women as well. So that's one thing. Viewing domestic violence, or viewing substance use, all of those things comprise of where you can get your ACE score from. You know, not only the neglect or the physical abuse or the emotional abuse, you know, those things can comprise of the ACE score as well. So the ACE
I think
score is
Yeah, I
good.
think what I was trying to convey that you missed, I guess, in the connection was with you dealing with Black men with mental health. What are some of the things that you're seeing specifically with Black men based off of that childhood trauma that they're struggling to speak to? Because a lot of times women will come out, a lot of times a lot of women will come out now, they're starting to come out more about childhood trauma, whether it was sexual or physical or anything like that. But a lot of times men don't necessarily want to speak to those things. So can you tell us some of the things that you think men don't necessarily want to talk about when it comes to childhood trauma?
What was the last part?
Can you speak to some of the things that men don't like to talk about when dealing with childhood trauma? Somebody even said denial uh in the
Yeah, yeah.
comments. Yeah.
So I mean, what a lot of things have been normalized. Like, it's a lot of men who don't view being with the older woman as a teenager as a traumatic experience. You know what I'm saying? It can
Mm,
be a badge of honor based on that. So, it all
right.
depends. And so for a long time, I guess doctors, clinicians, everybody thought the mind and body was separate. But now we know that too, they're intertwined. The number one killer among African American men is heart disease. And you can get heart disease from being overstressed or high anxiety, hypervigilant, and all of those things. So those things can also stem from the physical side and lead to diabetes, heart disease, cancers, asthma, and stuff like that. So those things also can come from things that take place in your childhood. So we have to, so a lot of people, specifically men, become numb and desensitized to certain things because it's so repetitive, they think it's the norm. um so again, we got to break those cycles together as a community.
Right. Someone in the comments is saying sexual molestation, desensitization to violence. Those are big.
Correct. Yep.
Um, what other things I know? Because like women are not, we're not as aware. Like we don't have these conversations. So I wanted to like really do a deep dive so our women can recognize these are some of the things that our brothers are struggling with, but they don't want to talk about it, right? So
Hmm.
if how do you have that conversation with someone? Someone had a comment that said you think that someone might need to go to therapy, but you don't know how to convey that to them, or they might not think that they need to go to therapy. How do you encourage someone to seek therapy?
I mean, I guess it would depends on what they think those limitations or impairments are, and if that person even recognize those as issues, because to them it can be normalized. This can be where they are within themselves. So again, they can suggest resources or bring it to their attention that, hey, I seen that you has been doing this differently, or you acting a certain way, or do you want to talk? Do you want advice? You want tips? You want suggestions? Like, how can I help you? How can I assist you? And then at that point, they can again provide different resources, whether that is therapy for Black men or Black Men Here or NAMI Virginia, or just different websites. But again, like if that person don't see an issue with their actions or don't want help themselves, it's going to be difficult because they're going to continue to bump heads. There's going to be a lot of resistance there. And then, that person might feel judged. That person might feel belittled or embarrassed, so those things can happen. But once they
That's
get
what
over that,
someone just said. That's what someone just said. That's what a gentleman just said. One of our brothers in the comments said that they feel a lot of times men don't come and speak to women, speak to us women. I'm talking to us Hill Black Joy Tribe. They don't speak to us because we don't create a safe space for them to talk to us. The other thing is a lot of times they get turned off by us because we remind them of their mother wound that they have with their mother. So they might have been reared in a household, a single parent household, or even a two-parent household where their mother might have been angry growing up while they were growing up, right? So then they will literally trauma bond with somebody who acts just like their mother, someone who is speaking to them, fussing at them, nagging them a certain way, not speaking to them in a soft tone, and they don't want to talk to us because they feel like they're being judged. They feel like they're being belittled. They feel like they're being, you know, put back in that little boy that hasn't healed space. So I think it's very important that we have the discussion about you were talking about the normalizing things. Like, for instance, if you had a guy, it was so, I mean, even growing up, it was such a big deal with guys that were jocks that, you know, they would go around proud. They would go around proudly and talk about how they would engage in sexual acts with, different guys or different women. And it was like, I'm putting a notch on my belt. But it might have been an older woman, and that's still rape. But nobody wants to talk about that. Like, they normalize those things. And now it's like, how can we talk about those things without people thinking that that's normal? That's not normal.
I mean, abnormal and normal doesn't exist to certain people. So we can validate
Mm,
different people's experiences because we all have different tolerance levels. We have different resiliency levels. We overcome things differently. We process things differently. But again, once that space is made as safe as possible, I think he or she will want to open up and be vulnerable enough to share their experiences. And that's why therapy is important because, it allows people to not be judged, get a biased view, an unbiased view, um, just have somebody to process with them or assist them in articulating what they actually feel. So whether that is the here and now or going back to those childhood issues and process those things. And those things from the childhood can definitely manifest themselves differently too, based on attachment style. And a lot of people don't know that your attachment style can affect your relationship now in the future. Like if you go to work tomorrow and look at your coworkers, you'll see some of them don't know how to communicate or they don't know how to take being, being a team player within the work environment or in the community. Those things, all of those things are important based on how they were raised or how they weren't raised. Um, so, we just got to keep bringing this to our attention, continue to educate people, continue to make things available as far as like, so the norm is based on what the masses of society would do. You know what I'm saying? So I guess once you deviate from that, either you'll be an outcast, an outlier, or you'll be glorified, depending on which end of that you're in. So it all depends. But as far as something that's deviant or something that's maladaptive, I think it can be on that individual to change once it continues to be brought to his attention by multiple people or just him internalizing or her internalizing, I'm tripping, I'm pushing a lot of people away, or I'm not getting positive responses from a lot of people. So they'll view that unless they just have a personality to where they feel like these people are leaving because they want to and not something that I did. Then you got a whole different issue.
yeah. Yeah. I think this conversation is so good, you guys. It's good that we have James here kind of breaking down some of the stigmas and blowing the lid off of some of the things that plague not only just Black men but our community as a whole. Um, if there was something that you want to leave with the women uh, that are listening when it comes to Black men and their health and their mental health, what would that be? And how can we be an integral part in being a safe space, not only a safe space but being allies, because we've got sons, we have friends, we have fathers, we have brothers, we have nephews that we care about, we have husbands, we have partners that we care about. But sometimes because of the dynamic in how we communicate with one another, some of that is that there needs to be a bridge gap in a line of communication where we can speak to one another and create spaces for one another that's safe, where we can talk to one another about our issues. But from a Black man's therapist point of view, from your vantage point, and you speaking with Black men about their mental health, what could you say to our listeners about that communication breakdown and what we could do to help mend that?
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of people forget the third part of communication. They know the giver of the message, the receiver of the message, but nobody check for comprehension and understanding of the message. So um,
Mm,
it's okay to follow up and ask, like, help me understand. I'm not sure we talking about the same things or we doing the same things. Like, for an example, if let's say your partner come home and you say, hey, can you put the shelf up for me? They say, all right, cool. They didn't ask you anything else about the shelf. They just know you want it up. So now they put the shelf up. They put it up horizontal in the middle of the middle of the room, but you wanted it vertical on the left side of the room. They just
right.
heard put the shelf up. So so we got to make sure that we're asking the right questions. We got to make sure that we're putting ourselves in a position to be open enough to receive the feedback that's going to come with that. Because again, like if you would have just pried a little bit more or just offered a little bit more information, it could have went differently. The chef would have been where you wanted. So on both ends, we have to ensure that we're understanding each other, not just from the male perspective or the woman perspective. So we have to ensure that we're putting ourselves in that position to even not be met with resistance, but to have a discussion and figure out what's the best solution for us as a unit. And that, when I'm doing couples counseling, I make sure that they understand that, like, it's you two against the problem, not you two against each
Against
other.
each
And
other.
yeah, yeah. So once we can get past that part, and once people can understand, like, let me fully express what I need to know. Like, let me give you everything you need to know. And if you don't know something, I'm gonna have a open enough personality, and so you can come to me and I can give you this information, because oftentimes people want to ask questions, but they probably don't feel like this person is going to be genuine or open enough to, share that information. So, you probably got to do a lot of self checks too to ensure, like, I want to make this person feel that they can come to me with anything, even with children
Right,
or your partner or your
right,
coworkers. Like, you don't
right.
want to have people internalizing, like, oh man, I want to tell them this, but they're not going to receive it well, or they're going to fly off the hook, or they're going to do X, Y, Z. So, sometimes you got to do that self reflection. And then on your end too, though, you might just got to be bold enough to say, yo, you know what? Hey, you've been tripping. Or listen, I noticed you've been doing this. Can you do this a little bit different? Like, and that comes with boundaries too. A lot of people have boundaries, they just don't enforce those boundaries. So if one of your boundaries is, I'm gonna advocate for myself, I'm gonna be a little bit more assertive, a little bit more firm, then you got to enforce that.
Ooh, can we talk about boundaries for a second? Because I had a boundaries conversation a while ago, and it was mainly about boundaries with women, right? And how we fail to have boundaries. I wasn't raised in an era of boundaries. We didn't have boundaries. What does that look like for men? For black
So
men to have boundaries?
yeah, so a lot of people, men and women, have boundaries. Again, they just don't enforce them. So whether those be emotional boundaries or physical boundaries, even mental boundaries, you just got to know where you are, whether it's your limitations or your strengths, and you got to let people know certain things that you're not taking. And a lot of people don't know within the boundary spectrum, they can be loose or they can be rigid. Like you can be firm and say, "No, I'm good," and not even give an explanation, or you can say, you know what, case dependent, I might do, you know what I'm saying? So you control what you want to allow in and what you want to give out. So that's been the issue. And then depending on how you were raised or where you were raised, you weren't able to do that with certain people. You know what I'm saying? Like you didn't have the autonomy to create those boundaries with certain people based on relationship or based on culture or just based on the generational difference. So
Yeah,
um, even now, like you probably grown, but there's certain things you can't say to your mom or your grandparents or the older aunt within the family. You know what I'm
right.
saying? But
Yeah,
like I'm grown. You know what I'm saying? But just from a respect standpoint, you don't even want to go there. But I think now, though, the generations coming after us, they know to view us as, you know what, I can tell them how I'm feeling, and it not be an argument. It'll be interpreted as, all right, cool, you taking care of yourself. So those things are definitely important. Um, so we definitely have to ensure that we continue to again pass that along to the next generation as well. Because a lot of the generations above us, they wanted us to say, I don't want to say be inferior to them, but they made it clear, like, my way or the highway type, you know what I'm saying, in so many
Yeah,
different cases.
absolutely.
And with the lack of boundaries, it create those codependencies, you know what I'm saying? So you definitely want to ensure that you're putting yourself in a position to say, like, validate me, just recognize me, don't take advantage of me, let me know, I'm gonna let you know how I feel, without repercussions, you know. So being able to say yes or being able to say no is definitely important.
And that you're talking real good right now when you're talking about validation and codependency. uh we're starting to understand the verbiage. We have the language now to identify what those things are. We didn't have the language before. We're in that information age where we're able to speak to what those things are, whether it be narcissism, whether it be mother wounds, father wounds, and things of that sort, that now we can put that verbiage to that. We know what it is now. We can identify it and say, you know what? My mama was a little toxic. My daddy was a little toxic. You know, we grew up in toxic households, and they didn't know any better. They were just doing what their parents taught them. But now that we have the information, we can't just sit on that information. We have to actually make that information applicable to our life and our lifestyle, so that we are breaking that cycle or that generational uh thing where it's like, we don't, they didn't want to uncover the truth. No, the truth will set you free, literally. And so you got all these conversations about your uncle that, you know, that uncle that lived upstairs and nobody knew anything about. The uncle, no, was a vet, and he had mental health issues, but nobody wanted to talk about it, right? He was just a crazy uncle. But now we have that verbiage and we can speak to those things now. So I think that this conversation has just been extremely important for us to have. The dialogue has been wonderful. Talk to us about what you are doing. I know you, on your page, you have a dating game that you created. Can you speak to us about some of the things that you're working on going forward in your entrepreneurial experience?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, prior to me, like, even having a bachelor's, I was an entrepreneur. So, multiple houses, multiple business, and different investments. So, therapy was something that I hopped in to ensure that I'm giving back, to ensure that I'm not only leaving a legacy, but changing generations. And a
Right.
part of that, too, before I jump into the date game, is my book, Man, Just Express Yourself, which is an interactive planner guide for boys and men to better express themselves. And you can get that at Amazon, Barnes& and Nobles, Target, Walmart, and of course my website, mentoheal.com. And it's a good tool for partners and wives and parents, because the males in your life can write out that answer or they can draw it out. It's not that men don't express themselves, it's they don't know how to articulate in most cases. So, you know, this is a good tool. So if you are a wife out there or a girlfriend, you know, highlight a couple chapters, give it to your partner, and you guys do it over date night, so it doesn't feel like a chore to them. It feels like something to enhance you guys' relationship. So it's just been so beneficial to a lot of parents with teen sons, and of course a lot of wives who've been married for years on years, and you know, just getting our partner to open up and express themselves has been beneficial. I like reading the reviews and stuff. So yeah, I created a board game. I created a board game called Cheesy Dates, and it's dropping on November 15th. And it's a, you know, I'm a black man that created a board game, so that's the highlight of it. But just so many different men inbox me on getting date ideas and getting tips how to continue to sustain a relationship. You know, not only from the attraction piece, but from the mental piece, the just the overall relationship standpoint. So it's date suggestions in there. It's tough conversation cards, questions in there that you should ask, whether you about to start dating or whether you've been married for so many years. Just a lot of different prompts to assist you within your relationship. And then the board game aspect of it is just pretty much so it's not just a back and forth thing. It's something to entice everybody that can be stimulated within the circle or within the room.
That's awesome. Um, I thank you so much for having this conversation with us. I know that you are a person that, you know, is a beacon in this health, mental health space, specifically in our community. And so thank you for what you do for our community, for our men, as well as for our women as well. Um, it's just been a good conversation. It's been a great dialogue tonight. And by the comments, I can tell, I mean, everybody's like hearting it up. You know, they've been sharing it out. So it's been a really good conversation to have with you. And hopefully we can do this again and talk about some other things pertaining to our community.
Yeah, nah. Again, I definitely appreciate you. Allyship is important, and you know, anytime I can connect and provide a little bit of insight, I definitely want to do that. So, I try not to read the comments while I'm engaging. So, if I take your
I
word for it, you
know.
say people been hardening it and dropping questions. You know, that's a good
Yeah.
thing. So, if anybody want to reach out to me or have a question that we didn't answer, then feel free to email me or inbox me here, and I'll try to get you that information. But my website is www.mentoheal.com, men2heal.com. And from there, you can purchase the book, you can purchase a shirt, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. So many different videos on there. And since your page is primarily women, I did a video uh, earlier this week, single mom raising boys. So it's different tips that they can benefit from, you know, because it's often hard out here, you know, to disconnect.
Absolutely.
Um, you know, so it's a lot of different resources on there as well. If somebody is dealing with homelessness or needs suicide hotline or just mental health hotlines and stuff, is a resource link on there as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your expertise and just your availability to come on and share with my tribe, Heal Black Joy. And as always, you guys click to the link in our bio to sign up for all things Heal Black Joy. Um, Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, as well as TikTok. And can you give everybody your Instagram handle so that everybody knows where to go follow you now?
Yeah. So my Instagram is MEN_TO_HEAL. Um, Yeah, so that's the easiest place though. Just go to the website because you can find all that information there.
Right.
www.mentoheal.com.
And I put that in the chat, you guys. Someone said, who saved this live? It will be on Heal Black Joy's page on the IGTV section after we get off. It takes a couple of minutes, but you'll be able to hear the entire conversation. So thank you again tonight, James. Have a good one.
Yeah, you as well. Appreciate you.
All right. Bye.